Okay, so let's keep on talking about the anatomy of the digestive tract. And last time we finished up talking about the esophagus, so the next step is going to be the stomach. The stomach is a J-shaped organ. It's in the upper left region of the abdominal cavity. And it's a sac, basically, where we get our first start and a lot of digestion occurring. One of the things the stomach does is it churns the food, so it turns it around and mixes it. And for that reason, there's actually 3 layers of muscle in the stomach, which is different from the rest of the digestive system. I'll show you a picture of this on the slide. So this third muscle allows the stomach to churn, to move stuff around, to mix the digestive juices and enzymes and fluids with the food, which will help break it down. There's a lot of different structures in the stomach, but one we'll focus on are sphincters. Now, a sphincter is a muscle that's circular in shape, so it goes around and it almost acts like a pinch point on a hose. So they're muscular rings, and they regulate the size of an opening. Now, in the stomach, we have 2. We have one at the very top where food enters, and we call that the lower esophageal sphincter. And then we have one right at the bottom of the stomach that empties the stomach into the small intestine, and we call that the pyloric sphincter. So here's a look at the stomach. The functions of the stomach, of course, are threefold. It can act as a storage pouch for food, so food can go there and we can kind of store it while we're digesting it. So the stomach can expand, it can get bigger, and it can hold several liters. As a digestive organ, the stomach will secrete hydrochloric acid. So the inside of the stomach area has a very low pH. It's a pretty harsh environment. And we also have enzymes in there that can digest proteins, and pepsin is an example of that. So pepsin is an enzyme that will break down proteins. So if you eat meats, chicken, fish, beef, etc., the proteins from those meats will be broken down in the stomach by the hydrochloric acid and the enzyme pepsin. And the third thing the stomach does is it churns, it mixes, it swishes food around, and it actually can help with physical digestion, physically breaking down the food even more. And to help it do that, it's got these 3 muscle layers. So it's got an extra muscle layer, the stomach does. The whole digestive system will have circular and longitudinal muscles, and those will help with peristalsis, to move food through the digestive tract. The stomach also has this extra layer, the oblique muscle, and that helps the stomach churn and mix food together. Now, that's something that we only see in the stomach. Once the food passes through the stomach, it moves to the small intestine, and this is the longest part of the digestive tract. Okay. Now, the small intestine is named because it's got a small diameter lumen, not because it's short. So don't get that mixed up. If we were to take your small intestines out and stretch them out, they can be about 6.5 meters long. So they coil up a tremendous amount inside of our abdominal cavity, and they can be actually almost 6.5 meters long. So they can be quite big. There's 3 sections to the small intestine: the duodenum, the duodenum, and the ileum, and they all have 3 kind of slightly different functions. The duodenum is the most active section. That's going to receive the secretions from not only the stomach, but also from the pancreas and liver, and I'll talk about that in a little while. So the functions of the small intestine are going to be a lot of absorption. It's going to secrete a lot of mucus. A lot of that mucus is going to help protect the small intestine from the really acid environment that just came from the stomach. So the low pH chyme, that's what we call food and stomach acid mixed together. Once the chyme goes from the stomach to the small intestine, it's really low acidic, so it's really high acid, really powerful acid. So the secretions of the mucus, those are going to help prevent any damage to the small intestine. Small intestine are also going to have millions of these villi. We talked about those earlier, and those villi are going to maximize the amount of surface area we have in there, so that we can have much more absorption of our food, because there's a lot more membrane down there for our food and our nutrients from our food to pass through. Now, these villi are also fuller further subdivided into microvilli, and we'll have a look at those in a minute, and that further increases the surface area. Inside each villi, not only will we have a blood capillary where we can have the nutrients from our food absorb across the cell membrane and into the blood, but we'll also have a lymphatic capillary there that we call a lacteal. Now, a lacteal is going to be part of the lymphatic system, and it's going to help us with that third function when we talked about the lymphatic system, which is the absorption of fats. Once the food leaves the small intestine, it empties into the large intestine. Now, the large intestine is quite short in length, about 1.5 meters, but it's much bigger in diameter than the small intestine, and that's where it gets its name, from the diameter of the lumen, not from the length. The large intestine can be broken down into several different sections. We have the cecum, which is the first part where the food comes from the small intestine. Then we have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and then the descending colon. And then the final part of the colon is going to be the sigmoid colon, which has got a kind of an S shape, which moves into the rectum, and then finally the anus, which is the last part of the digestive tract. Now, what the large intestine does, its function, is to store and expel waste for after digestion. Okay, there's a lot of water that's absorbed from waste at this point. So one of the major things that the large intestine does is it absorbs water back from our food waste, because we really don't want to waste any water. If we can remove that from our waste, it's much better for our regular metabolism. The large intestine is a haven, which means a really, really good place for normal coliform bacteria to live. So what we're talking about there, we have hundreds of millions of bacterial cells that live in our colon, and this helps us, in fact, digest some of our food, and some of the secretions from the bacteria we use to help us produce vitamins. So having those bacteria in our guts is very, very important for digestion. So here's a look at a slide that's going to show us a cross-section of the small intestine. And we've looked at this before, and we've actually came as far as this picture here, which showed the 4 layers in the tissue plan, so the layers of the gut, the small intestine. But if we look at these villi, and we blow them up even more, and we come down here, we can see here we've got all on the outside, those cells are all going to be ciliated cuboidal epithelial cells. Columnar epithelial cells. So just like we looked at in lab, and these are going to have these microvilli on the edge. So that absolutely increases the surface area of that membrane by a large factor. So it makes it so much easier for us to absorb nutrients from our digestive system, from the food that we eat. All right. So if we look back at this picture here, if you look inside the villi, you'll see, of course, we're going to have the red artery or arteriole, and then we're going to have a blue venule. So this is going to be the red and the blue and the purple there. That's going to be a circulatory capillary. So that means the nutrients can diffuse right across that villus and enter the blood, where they can be taken back to the liver. Through the hepatic portal vein we talked about in the circulatory system. That green structure you see in the middle there is going to be a lymphatic capillary, and that's going to be our lacteal. And our lacteal is there to help us absorb fat, because fat is something that cannot move directly into the bloodstream. First it goes through the lacteal into the lymphatic system, and then eventually when the lymphatic system drains into the circulatory system, the fat goes along with it. So that's a cross-section of the small intestine. So the next thing we'll talk about are the accessory structures of the digestive system. Now, these are structures that don't make up the digestive tract, so it's not part of the hollow tube that food travels through. But these are organs that supply or add things into the digestive tract in order to help us digest and absorb our food. So some of the things that we've got here are the salivary glands. So salivary glands, of course, are located in the mouth, and they will produce saliva, which flows into our mouth to help moisten our food. But it also helps lubricate our food when we go to swallow it. and it also has some enzymes in there. So as soon as you start chewing your food, there are enzymes in your mouth that will start chemically breaking down your food, which will help speed up the way we help to absorb it when it reaches the small intestine. Another accessory structure you'll see there is the gallbladder. Now, this is a tiny muscular sac that stores bile. Now, bile is a substance created by the liver, which helps in digestion in many different ways. So the gallbladder, it enters in through the duodenum, the small intestine, through a common bile duct with the pancreas. So I'll show you a picture of that in a couple of seconds. But when food enters the duodenum, so when we first get food from the stomach, pass into the small intestine, then the gallbladder will contract, and it'll squirt a little bit of bile in there to help us digest our food. The next gland there is the pancreas. That's an important gland. We've already talked about the pancreas when we talked about the endocrine system. And if you look right down here on the bottom, you'll see that the pancreas is important, responsible for hormones that help regulate level of glucose in the blood. But from a digestive point of view, the pancreas is also important because it produces a lot of enzymes that help us digest fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and even nucleic acids. So there's a lot of digestive enzymes that are produced from the pancreas and are secreted into the small intestine. It also helps secrete a compound here, sodium bicarbonate, and that helps neutralize that stomach acid once it gets into the stomach, so that the acid doesn't do any damage to the tissues in the small intestine. Now, the liver is the largest accessory organ, and we talked about this in the circulatory system. It's a super important organ in terms of digestion. The main function of the liver is to emulsify fats, so it helps us by producing bile that will help in not only the absorption of fats, but it also helps us deal with fats once they enter the bloodstream, so we can break them down and make them more usable for what we need. There's endless functions for the liver, but some of those include storing glucose. So we store glucose in the liver in the form of glycogen, and when we need glucose for an energy boost, we can break down that glycogen and the glucose becomes available. It'll modify fats to make them more useful for in our regular everyday metabolism. It'll help store vitamins and iron, and you guys know iron is an important part of hemoglobin. It forms some of the proteins that we find in our blood plasma, and one of those is bilirubin. It's a place where we can destroy old red blood cells when they're not functioning anymore. The liver will take care of that. It synthesizes a nitrogenous waste product that's called urea. It helps get rid of those nitrogenous waste product, and it helps detoxify the body of a countless number of poisonous substrates. So the liver is a super metabolically active organ. It helps break down a ton of different things, and it does a lot of things to detoxify the body from anything that could be dangerous. So here's a look at those accessory organs we just talked about. You'll see the liver, you'll see the pancreas, the gallbladder, and some of the important ducts that you'll see here. If you look through the liver secretions will come out from the different lobes of the liver through the common hepatic duct. Also through the common hepatic duct, you'll have the contents of the gallbladder emptying, and then once it passes through, this is the cystic duct, it moves into the common bile duct, which then travels in through the pancreas, where it meets up with the pancreatic duct. So this pancreatic duct carries all of the digestive enzymes secreted by the pancreas, and then both the common bile duct and the pancreatic duct, they both empty into the lumen of the duodenum, which is of course part of the small intestine. So that's an interesting look, and that's having a look at the accessory organs of the digestive system.